Hi everyone, welcome to 345 Podcasts. I'm Andrew, I'm Director of 345 and I'm with my colleague Danny. And today we're going to talk about data warehouses. So Danny, where do we start?
So we keep hearing the phrase modern data warehouse. Now, I want to know what the difference is between a modern data warehouse and should we say like an old-fashioned or like previous gen data warehouse? So I
Uh,
think that's a nice place to start. Is that a bit,
that
is
is a
that
that is
okay?
a good place to start, yeah. Well, first of all, let's say a couple of things about what we mean by modern data warehouse, what sort of territory we're looking at. So, for example, in the Azure world, you've got Azure Synapse Analytics, or is it Synapse? Synapse. No one knows how that's meant to be pronounced. But Azure Synapse Analytics is a modern data warehouse. If you look beyond that, there's a massive product in the market called Snowflake that is the largest ever tech IPO, and that's again a modern data warehouse technology. So we're talking about those type of things. And one of the interesting things about modern data warehouses is that they're built in a completely different way from the older generations. Because old-fashioned data warehouses, if you're going back sort of 20 years, they were basically just a big database. That they were you design a database and they had a you used to hear things like star schemas and that sort of thing. So ultimately you'd build a big database and that would sit on a database server like SQL Server or Oracle, and you'd just stick tons of data into it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, sitting underneath it was just a big database, and so and that kind of database ran on a database server, and so you kind of you and there's a limit to how big and beefy a server can be to store all that data and have access to all that data, and so that kind of broke them when you now talk about data warehouse with big data, that kind of broke that because one of the things we know about performance and cloud scale is it's all about not how big can you make a machine to handle all this, but how can you get lots of machines to coordinate together to do something. And so so that then we went through some what we call massively parallel processing kind of databases, and the latest evolutions of those for modern data warehouses is all about really the first thing is separating out storage and compute, because compute is expensive, storage is cheap. And so when you've got tons and tons of data to crunch, the actual crunching of it is when you need a load of that's when you need the servers to be spun up and to do the crunching the data. But to just hold that data, that doesn't that should be cheap, because that's just disk, and disk is relatively cheap. So one of the things that modern data warehouse do is they separate storage and data. They separate storage from compute. And so a modern data warehouse effectively is a way of coordinating a bunch of cloud resources, so that it looks like a database, but underneath it's a load of storage and servers all working to do stuff. But a modern data warehouse really is something that sits over the top of that and coordinates a load of cloud resources to actually do that work, which makes it much more scalable and much more efficient than previous generations, which means that you can do massive big data stuff. If you suddenly need to spin up 100 servers to go and process a data set for 5 minutes and then switch them off, you can do that sort of stuff. So really, it's the difference is that you're taking advantage of the kind of cloud concepts
And
rather than it being a piece of software.
And the nice thing with this, and I think this is certainly evident, is that having the ability to have the compute services look after this data, crunch numbers, it gives that ability to then take that data away and actually use it more successfully, rather than maybe an old-fashioned type data warehouse where it just goes in and it just comes out and then it goes
Yeah.
back in again.
Well, and that's one of the other things that again, one of the ways that you used to be, because you were kind of more limited on space and more limited on compute and that sort of thing, old-fashioned data warehouses, generally you designed at the start, it's almost like you imagine the report you wanted to see, and then you design the data structure to support the report that you wanted to see, and from the data from your source systems, you'd throw away what you didn't need, and you just focus on the essentials. And I think, again, the concept of modern cloud data practices are that you don't throw any data away. You might pull in what you need for a particular piece of analysis, but you don't throw away. Whereas the old data warehouses, you'd be much more constrained, because like for sales, you'd have, who's your sales, who's your salesman, what region are they in, what customer was it, how much did they sell, what product was it, and you just build up that, and then you can slice and dice that and that sort of thing. But ultimately, once you've built your data warehouse, it's very you're kind of constrained in that. Whereas now you've got access to pull in a much richer kind of and varied set of data and crunch that. And that's that's obviously as you learn, because one of the things that's in the background behind you is, unfortunately, it's just behind your left shoulder, but it's ask the right questions. Because the thing is that there we go. But the more you learn, the more you know that what other questions you want to ask. You might start off by saying, I want to know this, but then once you've learned that, you can say, well, what about that, and how does that vary with that, and and so having that flexibility to pull in more data and to ask different questions is really essential in kind of modern analytics.
And that's definitely the part that we sort of get a little bit maybe overexcited about, is that the analytics side, where we can go back through it, and why does this do this, and why has that been over there, and fantastic way to keep up to date and keep moving through your own business as well. I also wanted to have a quick jump on around data lakes, because what I have had recently is a number of questions posed around the difference and the contrast between data lake and data warehouse. Do we use both? Do we pick one or the other? What are your sort of thoughts around those two?
So obviously we're very cheerfully talking about data warehouses in this podcast, and then on previous podcasts we've really cheerfully talked about data lakes. So it probably comes as no surprise that from my perspective, you probably want both. I think I know what you mean, because I read an article the other day, and it was saying that modern data warehouses are so good you don't need a data lake anymore, because this whole thing of separating compute from storage means that the storage is now cheap, because people used to go to data lakes because the storage was cheap. Now that the storage is cheap on modern data warehouses, therefore you don't need a data lake. And I don't agree with that fundamentally. And the reason is that yes, data lakes allow you to store huge quantities of data cheaply. That's like reason number one for a data lake. But I think the other thing about data lakes is that they allow you to store anything. They allow you to store structured data, such as the tables of data and that sort of thing. Semi-structured data, which is kind of machine readable, but it's but not always in a consistent format. And then unstructured data like photos and video and handwritten notes and just any jottings that people have said in a PowerPoint presentation, and those are kind of unstructured data, and with a data lake, it's that kind of data warehouses still want really structured data. So maybe that there's a big overlap between the structured data part of a data lake and the data warehouse. But as you move towards a semi-structured and unstructured data, then that still needs to live somewhere, and data lakes are still a great thing for that. So it's very much a horses for courses. There's no kind of, as with anything, data lakes or data warehouse, they're kind of two tools in the toolkit, aren't they? And you've got to look at the problem you're trying to solve and say, what's the best tool for this problem I'm trying to solve? And you're never going to say, one or other of them is the one to use 100% of the time. It's just what's the right tool for the job, for the problem that I'm trying to solve right now. So the other thing is that with data lakes, you can actually use them as a staging area for your data warehouse. So as systems are generating data, you can put them in your data lake, and then you can then use that data lake to load into your data warehouse. So for example, on the Azure Synapse, that has something called Polybase, which allows you to load data from basically from files on the data lake into your data warehouse. So it's not either or. It's there can be a great combination, and a really good solution can kind of use both.
Yeah.
Okay. So does that kind of cover off that one?
I think that covers it off nicely. It keeps it nice and open, I think, and I think it will definitely depend on the type of business that you are and the type of things that you do and the type of data that you're bringing in. But also, it just keeps everything open to choice, I guess. And like you say, there's no real one glove fits all. So we'll move ourselves back to the modern data warehouse and excuse me, into the reason why. Get that out. Let's get that out on a Friday afternoon. So why would we build a data warehouse now, or why would a business do that?
So it's there's an interesting trend, I suppose, that's been going on for quite a while, but it's only accelerated, and that is that there was a time a while ago when if you wanted to, people thought that building your own bespoke piece of software gave you competitive advantage, and so a lot of software consultancies, like me included, worked for many years building custom software for companies, so that did just what their business wanted to do, and they felt it gave them competitive advantage. Now, what companies have been finding over the last, increasingly over the last few years, there's a couple of things. The first one is that a lot of those old systems that they wrote, they might be on-premises systems that might need to get lifted to the cloud. But even if they lifted to the cloud, they're a bespoke thing, and so you've still got to look after them. All that happens if you move them to the cloud, you lift and shift them to the cloud. You still got, you're not buying the servers, you're just renting the servers, but you still got to look after them. And so, and the other thing is that software still needs to be maintained. And as these systems get older and older and bigger, you end up being more and more expensive to just to maintain them, even to just keep them running. And so what 10, 15, 20 years ago, companies were sort of putting in these systems, and it's like, yeah, great, we've got this new system, it's just for us and that sort of thing. And now they're thinking, oh God, it's just so hard to get any change done. It's so expensive. And so there's a big move to migrate from your old bespoke systems or even your old on-premises applications that you bought, and to buy software as a service, SaaS applications. Now, and there's loads of examples of that. I mean, you look at CRM, and then there's things like Salesforce.com. To CRM, there's HubSpot. We use one called Pipedrive. There's loads of CRMs, but there's a whole load of industry-specific ones as well, depending on what there's like, if you're a recruitment agent, there's a CRM just for that industry. If you're an estate agent, there's a CRM just for that industry. And so you start to think, well, if I'm an estate agent, I don't want to have my bespoke system. I might as well buy the best estate agent CRM that's out there, and it works, and it'll be hosted, and all I've got to do is I pay so much per user per month, and everything else is done. They maintain it, they host it, they put new features in, and it gets better all the time. And then you kind of think, well, I've got my financials, so you might, people using things like, very small businesses might use something like QuickBooks or Xero, that are the kind of really ones you see advertised, but there's also things like, Oracle, NetSuite, loads of other kind of financials. Similarly, for like production systems, ERP, people are buying, if you really got money to burn, you might buy SAP HANA. That's a hosted version of SAP. You might buy Microsoft Dynamics 365. Either for the ERP or for the financials. So there's some quite serious systems. People are going and buying the hosted version, because then all this cost of change goes away, and you're just renting the software. Similarly, you might have telephony. You might so even whereas people used to have a PBX in their office and hook all the desks up to it, now you actually you can rent a voice over IP over the internet, and you just get an internet phone, a soft, or even just a soft phone on your computer, and then you've got your telephony, but it's hosted somewhere on the internet. So loads and loads and loads of businesses now are just really going that route. So they're going from, they had on-premises systems and thinking, well, actually just hosting this stuff in the cloud is just, we don't want to do it. We want to go straight to SaaS. We just want to go straight to software as a service. You host it, I'll use it, hunky-dory. Now that's great, apart from what happens then is that each of these different software vendors that you're using, you've got like a little silo of data that's in that software vendor. So so suddenly your CRM, and you might have previously have had all this stuff in one database on your custom system, or it might have been a couple of databases, but you could do a call within your own data center. Now these are completely disconnected pieces of data. So you've got a silo of data that's your CRM, and then you've got a silo of data that's your production system. You've got a silo of data that's your financials. And how do you then combine those to because one of the things we often talk about with analytics is it's all about combining all these different data sets together to give you the full picture. And so whilst you've gone to this sort of hosted software applications, that's great from just using the app perspective, but when you look at the analytics, you've got all these different bits of data. And so building a data warehouse, and especially if you were going to build one, you'd build a modern one now. But the point being that you can, if you keep extracting all the data out of all these different software systems that you're using, you can pull it all into one place, where you can then analyze all the data of your business together in one place, rather than just looking at the reports in CRM. Or what happens if you need to report those CRM against what's happening in your production system and that sort of thing. So building a data warehouse means that you can get all that data in all together in one place. And the other thing is that I mean the other thing is, the other way I look at it is that it's your data, right? It's your data, and data is almost like the crown jewels of your business now for a lot of companies. Your data is one of the most valuable things you've got, and currently you're renting your own data, you don't own it. So by building a data warehouse, you're taking ownership, or even a data lake. Data warehouse, data lake, pull it all in, you've got ownership of your own data. And that's a very, very powerful thing, because if one of these software vendors goes up the spout, or you fall out with them or whatever, you've still got your own data, and they can't take it away from you. So always own your data, don't just rent it. So that's kind of the big driver for that. And what that means then is that you can pull all this data in, and then you can use your data warehouse. You can use the analysis tools in it to crunch all the numbers, and then you can use tools like Power BI or Tableau to really give yourself some rich dashboards and rich visualizations of that data. So it gives you a lot of possibilities that aren't open to you if you're just using the apps themselves.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. Flexibility, scalability, all part of that as well.
Yeah, and but as much as anything, it's just always have all your data available. Don't let any of it let any of it be lost, because you don't know how valuable it's going to be until someone asks a question and you think, oh, if only I had that other bit of data, I could answer that. So always get all the data together, because you never know what question someone is going to ask in the future, even if you think now that it's unimportant.
I think that's a good message to end with, is take ownership of your data. That's a good message to end with. And you know, 345 Technology obviously here to try and help support that and answer any questions if there's anyone out there that, you know, aren't sure where to go next and how to look at this option. So yeah, we're happy to try and help there.
If that's you, get in touch.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, little bit of an advertising push there, but why not?
Why not? It's Friday.
Exactly.
Even though you're unlikely to be listening to this on a Friday, but yeah, let's wrap up there then. So thanks a lot for listening. I've been Andrew. This has been Danny, and we'll catch you soon. Okay, bye now.
Take care. Bye bye.